Representative Bratton.
Excused.
Representative Erickson. Here. Representative Guggenmoss.
Here.
Representative Kelly.
Here.
Representative Lawley.
Here.
Representative Singh.
Excused.
Representative Strzok.
Here.
Representative Williams.
Excused.
Chairman Andrew.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right. Thank you. We are on House Bill 307. We already were able to hear from the sponsor and state agencies. So we are taking public comment. Anyone here plan to testify in support of 307? In support? And anybody against 307? Okay, so we'll take 7 minutes of testimony, starting with opposed. So if you're speaking in opposition to House Bill 307, please come take a chair. Good morning.
Morning. Thank you,
Please go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman.
Afternoon. It's afternoon.
Guess it is afternoon.
It's been a long day. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of this committee. I haven't testified in front of this committee ever and not a lot, so I'm a tiny bit nervous, so I'll try to make this brief. My name is Karen Rimmer. I'm the Commerce County Clerk, and I'm actually here today representing the Clerks Association, so I'm speaking on behalf of them. I would like it noted for the record that there is no county clerk in the state who has any issue with poll watchers. We all believe that they serve a very important role in our election process and ensuring election security. So I do want to make that really, really clear. I do have some comments today. I have some proposed amendments, and there are also some fellow clerks who would also like to give you some commentary about this bill. So poll watchers are relatively new in Wyoming, at least since I've been a clerk. We had them no one had any in 2020. We had them in 22 and the 24 election cycles. All of us worked, I guess I should also state, not all counties even had poll watchers. Most of us did, but not all counties did have poll watchers in their counties. So each of us worked closely with our party chairman. Also, I'd like to note for the record that I've only had Republican poll watchers in my county. I think that's kind of the majority of what we've experienced. But so we've asked the parties repeatedly that, if there are issues when you are serving as a poll watcher, that you notify us, let us know, and please notify us immediately, because it is really difficult for us to respond to an issue or correct it if we aren't aware of it. And I did receive a report after the 2024 general election from my party chairman. I think I might be the only clerk who did. I don't think anyone else did. So the reason that's important in my commentary is that one of the biggest issues with this bill in the Clerks Association opinion is just the security issues that it brings to light. So if a poll watcher's duties, and this is stated in the bill, are to observe voter turnout, voter registration, and the words that are added at vote counting, none of those activities are happening before the polls open or after they close. And currently, poll watchers are allowed to stay until every vote is cast. And so the question would be, what are their duties before polls open and after they close, if this is what the definition is? So that's a question that we would like some clarity on. Why do they need to be there? So the other part of this is that this bill almost assumes that there's some wrongdoing. And in conversations that I've had with the Secretary of State and his staff, there were some incidents that were presented to them. This bill seems to be a response to that. So comment being, sunlight is the best disinfectant. I have some sunlight for you as well. So I guess, first of all, I would say that the election judges are the ones who are there before the polls open and after they close. I've never been there personally. I'm at my office conducting other duties for the election. So election judges are predominantly nominated by their parties. They take an oath, they take training. Most of them are very involved in their central committees and in other civic activities within their communities. Point in case to that would be with my party chairman. He had made the comment at one time you know, I'd like to stay after to see what you guys do. And I said, well, you can't do that. The law doesn't currently allow it. And I said, if you'd like to do that, become an election judge. And he said, I don't need to. I already have people on the inside. So I don't think there's really that big of a concern, at least in my county, with what's happening before the polls open or after they close. And again, these are the election judges. They are sworn. They have a duty, actually, in statute 2215-108, that they are required. They have a duty to challenge voters if they, the statute actually says whenever existence of legal grounds for doing so is known or apparent to the judges. And poll watchers are electors. They are not election officials. So they don't have a duty. They don't swear an oath. They represent parties. They do not represent the public. And in my opinion, and I think I can speak for the association to say that this bill is, it is not a bill for the public. It is a bill that would benefit parties. Further, there was some discussion about badges that I had with Secretary of State and his staff. Badges are necessary for the security and transparency of an election. This bill does have some language in there that that clerks may, that poll watchers may wear a badge. I feel that they should have to wear a badge. And an example of that is basically, I'll use my county as an example. We collaborate with many agencies, law enforcement, Homeland Security, dispatch, and so they know who our head judges are, what their contact information is. They also know who the poll watchers are. And another section of this bill would allow the substitutions to be made up to the time the polls open. That's really not, it's not reasonable for us to be able to ensure the security of a polling location if we don't even know who's going to be there. Election judges wear badges. Poll watchers should have to wear badges as well. It should be, you know, should have to state their party, their name, what polling location that they are certified to be at. And in my opinion, even the time frame for that, because they do work in shifts sometimes. And again, this is just a security question. It's very hard to ensure security if we don't know who is allowed to be at that polling location all day long. This is going to sound really petty, but I want to talk about chairs. And in the bill, there is a section that says we shall provide chairs. The reason this is significant is because the bill also would allow for one poll watcher for each precinct. So I want to give you some examples. If there is a vote center, and there is a county that has this, they have 8 vote centers, 32 precincts in the county, 2 parties at least, but from testimony, apparently this is for minor and major parties. That's 512 people that we have to, if we don't count minor parties, that we have to make sure that there are chairs for. Now, in my county and in a lot of counties, we rent these facilities. We don't provide our own tables and chairs. We rent them, you know, our high school.
Sorry, we have about 10 seconds
10
left.
seconds
of the allotted
left.
7 minutes. I'll make it 10 and 10. I think we need to take a little more than I had originally anticipated, but if
I
you'd like to
appreciate
leave
that.
time for questions.
Okay, all right, very good. So anyway, chairs is an issue. Basically, we don't feel that that is reasonable as well, because we would have to plan for, it's not the right term, but worst case scenario, how many people are we potentially going to have to provide chairs for? And so that's going to become a problem. In addition, some of these polling locations are very small. Well, if you still have 6 precincts, 12 precincts, whatever the case may be, that's 24 chairs, potentially more, that we have to provide. Some of these polling locations are 2 hours away, so it just presents some problems. I guess I'll cut to the chase here, and I can give you some amendments if you'd like, but the request for considerations in our amendments, and I've skipped a lot, I apologize, but poll watchers do not need to be present before the polls open or after all voters have cast their ballot. Their defined role is not an election official, and the duties occurring at these times do not fall under poll watcher observation duties. We need to have the list of poll watchers before, at least the day before the election. That's how statute reads now. We can work with that, but to have them be able to make substitutions before the polls open is just not reasonable for us. And again, badges should be required. There should be some required information on those badges that identifies them clearly, so voters can also tell who is a poll watcher and who is an election judge. That's important, because poll watchers are not allowed to discuss anything with the voters. They're not allowed to interact with voters. They're there to observe only. Poll watchers should have to take some kind of oath. I don't know if it's in rules or if it's in statute where they're not able to question or interview with voters or election process, but they should not be allowed to take photos, record videos, or capture audio
All
during
right,
their
we
shift.
have 1 minute left.
Okay.
Would you,
And,
anyone else have time to speak as well? Or
pardon me?
would you like anyone else to have time to
Yes,
speak as well?
I would.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Nope, thank you. And I'll stand for any questions. Thank you very much.
All right, are there any questions? Representative Strzok.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I guess I was just wondering, I know it's not a huge deal, but the issue of the chairs, are we expecting these 75-year-old that decides they want to be a poll watcher? I mean, I'm just a little curious why that has become a problem. Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman, thank you. Thank you, Representative Strzok. Good to see you. And that's a great question. Again, what I had required was that, or requested rather, was that we have to make arrangements with those facilities. The poll watchers can, or the parties can make arrangements with those facilities as well. Another option is to bring in a camp chair, that kind of thing. I will also add that I don't think there was a single county that didn't provide a chair. I might have been the exception where I said, they have them there, you can make arrangements the same as I do. But I think every other county that had poll watchers provided tables and sometimes chairs and sometimes tables for them. But I don't believe it's unreasonable to say you can bring a chair with you or make arrangements with that polling location for seating.
Thank you. Further questions? All right, seeing none, we will take testimony in support of the bill for 10 minutes. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
this
please
on?
state your name and where you're from.
There we go. Yeah, my name is Brian Shuck. I'm an attorney here in Cheyenne. I've been practicing for over 30 years. I am appearing today as a voter in Laramie County. I do represent the Wyoming Republican Party and have been their general counsel for the last 6 years. And so I'm very familiar with these issues. I also had the opportunity of a lifetime to go down and serve with Trump's team and the RNC's team in Arizona 4 years ago and supervise their poll watching programs down there. And so while I was down there, I got to supervise 6 different polling locations and the poll watchers in those locations spread out over a 40-mile radius. So I was running around all day long trying to make sure my poll watchers had access to do what they needed to do and things were going smoothly. So I bring that unique perspective to this today as well. So one reason that this issue is coming up now is because in the past there had been a consent decree that the Republican Party had entered into where they agreed for 40 years that they were not going to do any poll watching. And that expired in 2020. And so that is why the poll watching programs were revived in all of the states at the request of then candidate Donald Trump and the RNC. And so that's why these issues are coming to the forefront right now. Nobody's really looked at the poll watching statutes in a very long time. It's hard not to listen to what the clerks have to say and feel like they haven't gotten their feelings hurt in some way by the Republican Party starting up the poll watching program once again. But I can assure you, those of you here, that the issue in front of us today is more of an issue of process, not personalities. The issue is trying to create a process that works so well that we don't have to worry about problems with our elections. And we can, with confidence, tell voters that they have every reason to believe that their votes are counted. So that would be the goal. And that's why I care about this so much personally, because voting is a fundamental constitutional right. So I can't think of anything more important than that you will be handling during this legislative session.
All right, is that,
So I wanted to address a few of the things that are in the bill. Representative Pendergraft and Secretary Gray did a great job of teeing it up on Wednesday. This will do a few important things. It will extend the poll watching process to occur before the polls open, during polling, and after the polls close. When I was in Arizona, it was crucial that we be there after the polls close to watch them balance their poll books with how many people voted, and go through that whole process of securing the ballots, making sure that that process is followed carefully so that everybody can have confidence in the security of that election. The sole purpose of the poll watchers is to observe, nothing more. They're just there to watch. If an issue comes up, then they report that to their particular party's election integrity committee and take care of it accordingly. The other things that this would do is make sure that poll watchers are close enough to what's going on to where they can hear and see the election process. In the past, poll watchers have been told to either be in a separate room or far enough away that they could not see what was going on. And they don't want to see names on computers or poll books. They just want to be close enough to know that they have the ability to observe the process. And then there's just some troubleshooting to be done in this bill. And I'll address a few of the issues that the clerks brought up. I agree with them that poll watching is a crucial function. It serves a very crucial role. They had asked why exactly it needs to occur before, during, and after, and that is because there are things in the last 4 years that have come to light that that have caused people to question whether their votes are being counted. I will forever
we're a little
have,
over half our time. I'd appreciate if you'd
yep,
wrap up. Thank you.
I'll forever remember the video in Georgia of people pulling suitcases out from underneath tables and continuing with processing ballots while everyone else had left. Nobody is saying that that's happening in Wyoming, but like I say, if we can create a process that has so much integrity, then we don't have to worry about election issues. So I do have an amendment to propose to deal with the issue of 512 chairs. I think that's a misreading of what was intended by that language, and I think that would give everybody a comfort level that that's not what was intended, and I can propose that at the appropriate time, if you wish. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, Ms. Simmons.
Gail Simmons, Civics 307, and Y vote on and for the bill, and I have an amendment that I believe may have been passed out to you. High level, the only rights that are of importance at the polling place are those of the voters. These are county elections. Poll watchers should be from the county. And page 6, lines 15 through 17 make no sense to me the way it's written. How could any badge that is for a poll watcher not be specialized or custom? So my proposed amendments are first on page 3, line 1, and page 3, line 16, delete rights and insert responsibilities. On page 4, line 17, delete state and reinsert county. Page 6, lines 15, 16, and 17, after badges on 15, delete remainder of line, and 16 and 17, delete all. And then on line 15, after badges, insert, consistent with the size and format of all other poll worker badges to include name, poll watcher, party, polling location. And one other comment on reporting to party election integrity. If they see something that they think is an issue, the first thing they should do is notify the election judge, and then afterwards, they can contact party election integrity. That was just in general, not anything that goes into the bill. So with that, I stand for questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? All right, I have a question. The part about notifying the judge first was not in your amendment, was it?
Mr. Chairman, that was a side note.
That was a side note. Okay. All right, thank you. Representative Bratton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the badges, are you saying they should have that information, but they could still just fill in it? They don't have to have an official printed up badge, just fill in that, as long as that information is on the thing they fill out.
Ms. Simmons.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Bratton, actually, the majority of them should be pre-printed. To the point that the clerks made, last-minute changes need to be accommodated, so those could be handwritten. But my concern is that again, for security reasons, all of the other official individuals who are working at a poll are going to have a badge. And so the badge needs to be consistent with that, like not like have a, I don't know, I probably shouldn't say this, yellow star or something on it, but consistent with those others, because they are, through this statute, now performing an official duty authorized by the state and therefore should have a badge. I have no, they can manage it themselves if they need to have it, if there's a last minute that it gets written out. But this information needs to be clearly shown and not covered up in any way.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Seeing none, public testimony is now closed. Committee, what is your pleasure? Moved by Representative Strauch, seconded by Representative Guggenmoss. Are there any amendments? Representative Williams.
I'd move the amendment that was just proposed and spoken.
Do we have a second? Second. Seconded by Representative Singh. Any discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, we are voting on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, no. Amendment is adopted. Is there any further amendments?
Real quick, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, was that the amendment Ms. Simmons proposed?
Yes, it was.
Okay, thank you.
Further amendments? Discussion on the bill. Representative Guggenmoss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We discussed, I believe, a couple on pages 3, line 3 and line 18, crossing out or deleting section and replacing it with chapter. And I was trying to remember why that was suggested, if anybody remembered that, and if we should do that.
I would. Representative Strauch, sorry. So usually those things are flagged by the LSO and then they email them to me once they get onto general file. So I think we could probably discuss that with them and then I could run it as a committee of the whole amendment if we need to. Further discussion? Seeing none, we are voting on the bill. Please call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, on House Bill 307, poll watchers, polling station observation do pass as amended. Representative Bratton?
Aye.
Representative Erickson? Aye. Representative Guggenmoss?
Aye.
Representative Kelly?
Aye.
Representative Lawley has left an absentee vote of no. Representative Singh?
Aye.
Representative Strock?
Aye.
Representative Williams?
Aye.
Chairman Andrew?
Aye.
8 aye, 1 no.
The bill passes the committee. The House Bill 200 is now on the table for our consideration. Good afternoon, Representative Heiner and Webb. Would you please walk us through the bill and also explain any amendments that you have for the bill as well?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the committee, for letting us present this bill.
Introduce yourself.
My name is Joe Webb. I represent House District 19. And before we begin, I just wanted to make you aware, as the good chairman indicated, there are several amendments that we are proposing. This bill has been a result of many people and organizations, and we feel we have come up with something that'll be beneficial to parents, teachers, and students alike. House Bill 200 attempts to amend Wyoming Statute 21-3-135. This statute came from Senate File 9, which was passed by the legislature last year. The intent of this bill is to make more definitive a few of the intentions of Wyoming Statute 21-3-135. On page 2, lines 15 and 16, we have added the words "including school district personnel" to be more definitive. So subsection A reads, "Each school district, including school district personnel, shall." And then below subsection A, the existing language says, "shall notify a student's parent or guardian as soon as practicable if there is a change in the student's educational, physical, mental, or emotional health or well-being." And then to be more definitive, the words "during school hours or while the student is engaged in any activity, extracurricular activity, event, program, or function where school district personnel are responsible for the student regardless of location." Just as a note, you will see this phrase that I just quoted many times or several times, and it's to be more definitive. On page 3, line 12, the words "or discouraged" are added to the existing law. And then beginning on page 3, lines 15 through 18, we see the words "during school hours," and I'm not going to repeat that again because I just read that to you. On page 4, line 3, the word "or" is deleted before the words "gender identity" and placed after the words "gender identity," so the words "diversity, equity, and inclusion" can be added on page 4, line 4. On page 4, lines 6 through 11, Romanet 6 is added to require the school to notify the student's parents or guardian at least 5 days in advance of a student attending or participating in an assembly, extracurricular activity, or guest speaker presentation. And then we propose that the sentence be amended to say "that addresses sexual orientation, gender identity, or diversity, equity, or inclusion," thus giving the parent the opportunity to opt their student out of any activity that addresses sexual orientation, gender identity, or diversion, equity, and inclusion. On page 4, Romanet 7, is also added, proposing that the students and staff are not required to refer to a student using the student's preferred pronoun if that pronoun does not align with the student's biological sex. Line 4, lines 19 through 23, Romanet 8, requires school districts to adopt a policy that allows district personnel to withdraw from mandatory classes and trainings and activities that include diversity, equity, or inclusion. It does not include sexual orientation or gender identity. On page 5, lines 13 through 17, we see again the words during school hours. And once again, we're just trying to be more definitive of when things are in place. Our amendment proposes that lines 22 and 23 on page 5 be deleted entirely, as well as lines 1 through 12 on page 6. On line 23 of page 6, the colon at the very end would be replaced with a period. On page 7, our amendment proposes lines 1 through 12 be deleted entirely, and on line 14, that only the Romanet numerals, III, be deleted and leave the remainder of the paragraph. On page 8, our amendment proposes lines 1 through 15 be deleted entirely, and then on line 17, the letter K be replaced with the letter H. The section now lettered H is the definition section, which we will now move into. On page 9, our amendment proposes the definition of curriculum on lines 5 through 9 be deleted. On page 9, our amendment proposes that we delete the definition of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that it be replaced with diversity, equity, or inclusion means any program, activity, or policy that A, promotes discriminating for or against a person on the basis of race, color, sex, national origin, or religion. B, promotes the concept that a particular race, color, sex, national origin, or religion is inherently or systemically superior, inferior, oppressive, oppressed, privileged, or unprivileged. Or C, promotes gender ideology. On page 9, line 17, Romanet V would be changed to Romanet IV because of the deletion of the definition of curriculum above. On page 10, before line 2, our amendment proposes to insert and renumber the necessary, or as necessary, the definition of gender ideology as the concept of replacing the biological category of sex with an ever-shifting concept of self-assessed gender identity that A, permits the false claim that a biological male may identify as a female, non-binary, or a combination of male and female. B, permits the false claim that a biological female may identify as a male, non-binary, or a combination of male and female. C, requires that other persons and institutions to accept requires other persons and institutions to accept a claim made under paragraphs A or B of this paragraph, or D, recognizes that there is a vast spectrum of genders that are disconnected from a person's biological sex and allows for a person to be born with the wrong biological sex. Then on page 10, line 7, our amendment proposes the words and any being deleted with along with line 8 entirely and the words district personnel on line 9. Lastly, our amendment proposes that page 11, lines 2 through 15 be deleted entirely. That is a lot of information, but generally, what we are doing is 1, being more definitive with a few things, 2, giving the parents the option to opt out of assemblies or presentations on giving the parent to opt out their student of assemblies and presentations on sexual orientation, gender identity, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. 3, having districts adopt a policy whereby members, where staff and students are not required to use a student's preferred pronoun if the pronoun does not align with the student's biological sex. 4, adopt a student policy or a district policy for personnel to withdraw or opt out of mandatory classes and training programs involving diversity, equity, and inclusion only. And 5, providing some definitions. And with that, I would stand for questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Representative Erickson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Webb, I wasn't able to write that fast, and I know you went over those in detail, but would you go through your 1 through 5, please, just that you made at the end when you clarified? Yes.
Representative Webb.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Erickson, 1 through 5 are these: being more definitive with a few things, giving the parents the option to opt out of assemblies or giving parents the option to opt their students out of assemblies, presentations on sexual orientation, gender identity, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. 3, having districts adopt a policy whereby staff and students are not required to use a student's preferred pronoun if that pronoun does not align with the student's biological sex. 4, adopt a policy for personnel to withdraw or opt out of mandatory classes, trainings, or programs involving diversity, equity, and inclusion only. And 5, providing some definitions.
For Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Were number 1 and number 5 similar?
Representative Webb.
No, Mr. Chairman, no. Providing some definitions refers to the definition part. The clarification or the being more definitive, I am referring to the parts where it talks about like in page 2, line 15, including school district personnel. And then that quote that I gave, which is on the bottom of page 2, starts on the bottom of page 2, line 21.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to clarify and make sure I'm understanding this correctly, we are removing the onerous requirements for teachers to post everything they're teaching all the time and removing that threat of penalty if they don't.
Representative Webb.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Kelly, that is correct.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you. Oh, Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Majority Floor Leader Heiner.
Thank you for the opportunity of being here in support of this bill. As we take up legislation, sometimes there's a lot of noise around that legislation, and it gives us an opportunity to improve upon that. And this particular bill had a lot of noise to it. But I think because of that, we've been able to improve upon it and remove some of these things that were causing some concern amongst teachers and school districts. And Representative Kelly mentioned that, but let's not lose sight of the purpose of this bill. Last year, we passed Senate File 9, a great bill to provide a better parental rights. But now we found a few leaks in the dike. We're sticking our fingers in some of those leaks to try and shore up that dike. And so let's not lose sight that the core reason for this is on page 2 to include school district personnel. And if you go to page 10, it defines what those personnel are. School district personnel means persons employed by a school district, independent contractors, retained by the school district, and volunteers who may have contact with students in the course of volunteering for a school district. This is one of the leaks we found. There were more opportunities to teach and influence our children on some of these
key things about gender identity and DEI and some of these things that we're trying to protect them from. And then the other thing that we're trying to do is, it's not only during the school hours when the student is in class, but during the entire time that that student is under the care of the school district. Extracurricular activities during assemblies, all the different avenues. So we're trying to shore that up with a little bit stronger with this legislation. So hopefully we've taken some of those concerns about curriculum being posted online and punitive actions. But let's focus on what this does now with this amendment. And I encourage you to pass the amendment and pass the bill so that we can shore up that what was passed last year with our parental rights. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any
And I
questions?
stand for any questions.
Representative William? Representative Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say I appreciate the added effort that went into this. I was one of the people who balked at seeing the bill in its original form as a former special education teacher. Sometimes we change up the plan right in the middle of a lesson when it's not landing. And this would have made teaching impossible. And it would have been impossible to comply with. And it's hard enough to be a public school teacher. They didn't need that extra weight. So I really appreciate you sticking up for parents, but at the same time protecting teachers' right to teach.
Mr. Chairman?
Majority Floor Leader Heiner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think there was a question in there. Mr. Chairman, Representative Kelly, when we first started formulating this bill, we anticipated broad leeway with the curriculum. Just something you post at the beginning of the year. We're going to teach American history from 1770s to 1800, and nothing more than that. But I can see how it began to be interpreted as something much more onerous. That's not what we intended from the beginning, and we were glad to be able to take that out, because to me, that's intellectual property. If a teacher has a lesson plan and it has to be put on public domain, we're taking away their rights. And so that's not what we intended. And I'm sorry that was the way it was interpreted, but I'm glad we found that out before it became legislation.
Further, Representative Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Floor Leader Heiner. I absolutely agree with the intent of this bill and what you just mentioned, but I would like to make clear that noise that you were referring to, those were my constituents. And I really appreciate you responding to that.
Majority Floor Leader?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Williams. That noise came from across the whole state, Representative Williams. It was not just and I appreciate your constituents for getting involved. This is the way we make legislation better, is by listening to the people as they get involved. And I'm just so excited that people are noticing what we're doing and taking action so we can respond and make something that's going to work for everyone. I'm always looking for those win-win situations. Thank you.
Representative Bratton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also wanted to thank both of you, and I went in with a four-pager yesterday with concerns that, my constituents had, and all of our constituents had brought. I really appreciate your working to make all these amendments, which we have been madly, crossing out to see what, what this bill looks like now. And I just wanted to say at the end that I am going to move we make a substitute bill so it's clear that everybody can then read it without all the crossing out and see what exactly we are left with if the bill passes. So, thank you.
Majority Floor Leader?
Thank you. I do agree with that. Mr. Chairman, Representative Bratton, I agree.
Thank you. Further questions? Seeing none. Would the superintendent like to speak to the bill? Good afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Megan Degenfelder, State Superintendent of Public Instruction. As you all know, parental rights has been a primary initiative under my term in office. as has efficiency, reducing bureaucracy, and valuing and supporting our teachers. And so we'll start off by just saying that I think that these amendments are imperative to the bill, and want to just walk through, some of those in that sense. First, that's already been discussed is the removal of provisions that just aren't feasible for our teachers. Having to post every single material, every lesson plan at the beginning of the year. This would prevent even the President of the United States of America from coming into a classroom unannounced to be able to speak to a class. It also would stifle innovation for our teachers to think differently, to be innovative in their classrooms, and just, again, add that unnecessary bureaucracy. I also want to highlight work that we've been doing for over a year on a transparency initiative in the state. We currently have 10 school districts who are on board with the initiative. It is housed through our Department of Education website, and we have a platform in which they can post primary resources. And so, would humbly ask that we continue on that effort to get more districts involved. That was really a grassroots effort where we involved superintendents from the get-go of how this could work best to really be transparent in our resources to our communities. Second area is, of course, better defining diversity, equity, inclusion. The problem when we just have that blanket language is that, for me at least, this is not about stifling diversity, difference of thought, different backgrounds, or including all of our population. We have to define what we mean by diversity, equity, inclusion, what has kind of encapsulated that. And so we want to make sure that kind of language doesn't mean that we can't teach about our history of our country, of our state, our Native American population. And so I think that that's very important. Also appreciate the removal of civil action on teachers. I think that that's an important amendment that was included as well. Would offer just a couple of additional things. I do think that in on page 4, I believe it is, when it discusses the not forcing someone to refer by certain pronouns, this could be a good area to add in what many states have done, the Given Name Act. Which could help in situations like we saw in Rock Springs, or I've talked to several teachers that struggle with if a child requests that they call them a different pronoun or name, whether or not there needs to be involvement of parents. And so a simple addition there could be in regards to not referring to a student by name or gender that's not approved by the parent. And then lastly, I would just say in some of this, as we talk about, the opting out of parents for presentations or materials that are around sexual orientation, gender identity, and I would say this less DEI, this is more, critical race theory. I guess I would pose a question to the committee of why are we allowing that in the first place when our, over the last 3 years, our third grade ELA scores are under 50% proficient or above the last 3 years. And so I would add that I don't think that should be taught at all in our classrooms. I think we should be focusing on the basics, and most teachers that I talk to want to do just that, to do what they do best, and that is to teach. So I would ask you to consider that. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I know that there's a lot of testimony, and so I would stand for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Are there any legislators in the room hoping to speak to this? I don't think so, but I see some. So, all right, we will move on to public testimony. I will do 15 minutes in opposition and 15 minutes in support, starting with opposition. If you would like to speak, please fill the chairs. And there's a couple we need to get to online as well. So I will go back and forth from here to there. So thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Mr. Chairman, my name is Dr. Jeff Jones. I'm currently the superintendent of Sheridan School District Number 1, which includes the schools of Tongue River and Bighorn. I had a different presentation after hearing what I just heard, but I do want to, and so I've cut out a good portion of it, but I do want to read some of what I had prepared, because at the same time, while I'm grateful for what we just heard, there's some feelings that might have gotten jacked up a little bit from having this come up to begin with. And I want to read something to you with that in mind. This is my 31st year in public education, and my 17th as a school administrator. I've also served as a teacher for 14 years, some at the K-12 level and some at the college level as a full-time professor. Mr. Chairman, the language in this bill goes beyond a lack of trust in our public school teachers. With all due respect, the new language in this parental rights bill is increasingly divisive. In addition, the requirements of teachers in this current bill are actually counter to pedagogical research, what works best in instructional practices. Moving further into the bill on page 4, small g Romanet 2 and 3 states effective school year 25-26, the school year after, and then it goes into all of the different things that would be required of teachers, which it sounds like may go away. I would just like to make a point around that, though. As a principal, if I had a teacher come to me the day before the first day of school and said, Dr. Jones, you're going to be super proud of me. I've gathered every single resource I will use this year in my classroom and uploaded it to our district website. I'm ready for day 1, day 180, and every day in between. Aren't you proud of me? I would actually be horrified if I heard that, because it would be clear to me that that teacher has no idea what it takes to meet the learning needs of students. Our best teachers plan their lessons going into each week. They begin teaching and frequently check on each student to see if they're learning and keeping up with the current design of the lesson. These checks for understanding are called formative assessments, and they happen multiple times throughout a lesson. Formative assessments formulate or drive your very next instructional practice, often during the same lesson. Our best teachers frequently adjust within the lesson, and that means they seek out a better way to help struggling students or better challenge students who got it the first time. They may do this by utilizing different resources than they had originally planned for the lesson. As a principal, if I said to a teacher on Monday, I would like to do a formal observation in your classroom on Thursday, can you tell me what you have planned? The best teachers will respond by saying, I can tell you what I have planned as of today, but I will not know for sure until I see how my students are doing at the end of the day on Wednesday. That is a teacher who knows their job. It's not defined by what is taught, but rather what is learned. And that dictates their next steps in instruction and the resources they will use. There's a provision in this bill that allows teachers to continually upload to the district website. I'm glad that that might as well go away. I'm going to skip the next part, which was civil action. There is one area, and maybe this is going to get removed, but there was one area that I thought was a bit problematic with the definition of policies, practices, and procedures on page 6, Romanet 7, where it reads any written or electronic material issued by a school district or school district personnel, and any unwritten customs. I'm not sure if that was going to stay or not, but the phrase unwritten customs encouraged by the district, not sure what that means. Does that mean we have a custom of encouraging teachers to get out into the hallway and welcome students into their classroom, and that's expected? I mean, that's a custom that's unique to a school. I'm not sure if that's going to stay or not, based on what was just previously introduced. And I'll finish with this, Mr. Chairman. I'm proud to be an educator in the state of Wyoming, and with all due respect, this bill, as it presented before the speakers earlier, it felt like a kick in the stomach to those of us in education. I hope that changes, and I'm glad that it sounds like it will, because I'm for parental rights. In my school district, we created a policy around parental rights in my first year as superintendent, a year before the bill passed here. We're very much in favor of that. But we were freaking out to be gentle with the language of what was going to be expected of teachers. So I'm very happy to hear that that might change. And can all stand for questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none. Mr. Mullen.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Tate Mullen, Government Relations Director for the Wyoming Education Association. I too had a very different presentation to give. I do want to commend the work that was done on the amendments. Obviously, you have a room full of dedicated educators behind you who are here to raise their voices to tell you that this isn't how we teach in the state of Wyoming. I think that every single one of you and everybody in this room could recall that teacher at that one point in their life that made an impact on them, that changed their life trajectory. I guarantee you those are the teachers that were allowed to be creative, that looked at the needs of the student and adjusted their lesson plans. That bill, as it came to us, would have stifled all of that and would have robbed students today and tomorrow of that amazing teacher and that memory down the road. I do want to highlight, I think there's still, again, appreciate the amendments that are in here. I think that there's a couple of flags I still want to raise. Obviously, the Wyoming Education Association values parental rights. We know that our students succeed when parents engage and work with educators to better develop those students and help them perform, right? It takes a village. But at some point when we start encapsulating everything under the lens of parental rights, I start worrying about single subject violations because we just kind of throw, at what point do we cross that line? Something to consider, just wanted to raise that flag. Page 3, line 12, the addition of the word "or discourage." For me, the word "discourage" seems vague. I have problems reconciling what that might look like, and I think that that is going to vary across districts and across schools. And anytime we have vague language, it presents problems for the implementation and practice of education. Additionally, and again, just to flag this last two pieces, we've heard a lot in this session about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think it's important to know that those are organizational frameworks. That isn't a curriculum. That's not in our standards. That's not in a lesson plan. It's an organizational framework. Just to give you a heads up when you guys are looking at additional education bills, it's a semantics issue, but it's something I think that we need to be careful with because, again, here we are looking at vagueness of language that could potentially have chilling effects, unintended consequences. The addition of the language, and pardon me because I didn't have a copy of the amendment in front of me, but in that next section, page 4, lines 6 through 11, that added the additional language that address, I believe it was sexual identity, gender ideology, diversity, equity, inclusion. The sexual identity and gender identity, we have health standards that are in, that our educators have to meet. And again, not that it's a promotion of, but when you go through those health standards, being able to teach about the birds and the bees and all of it that's part of that health standards piece. Just again, want to make sure that we're not stifling that piece of the requirement within our standards. So with that, I'll stand for any questions. And again, I want to thank the bringer of the amendments. One last piece. In every one of your districts, you have educators who are members of the Wyoming Education Association. If you have ideas on bills that will impact education, I strongly urge you to reach out to those educators, to the people who are boots on the ground, to say, hey, how can we make this work? This is what we're hearing as a concern. I guarantee you they'll listen. I guarantee you they'll work with you. What they're frustrated with is feeling blindsided when legislation drops like this on a consistent basis that negatively impacts their practice. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, good afternoon. Please state your name and where you're from.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Ashley Russo. I'm from Pine Bluffs, Wyoming. I'm an educator. I, like everyone else, came with a different presentation. I wanted to talk about the magic in the classroom and how much we value that time with our kids, and how much our students are respected and a part of that magic. I wanted to talk about taking time out to pause and extend a conversation. I wanted to talk about my 7th graders discussing a Sesame Street puppet that was neurodivergent, that they saw themselves in, and that was so cool. But when I was hearing these amendments today, although I was very excited for the litigation aspect, the idea of DEI as a English educator and as a 712 educator, I teach texts that include various backgrounds. I teach students that include various backgrounds. I've seen our students that are differently abled been put aside because of DEI. regulations. I am scared for my kids. This bill, although is now a lot more easy to chew, is intimidating as a teacher to look out at my kids and recognize that some of them we may not be able to talk about directly. I feel like that I would stand for questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr.
Ms.
Chairman.
Phillips, can we go online, please?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman.
back to the
Superintendent
table.
Teresa Chalk is in the room, ready to testify to you.
All right, good afternoon. Please go ahead.
Superintendent Chalk, I believe your microphone is having problems again.
All right, while we are waiting for her to fix her microphone, we have about 4.5 minutes left. If you'd like to provide testimony, please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Erin Estes. I've been in education for 15 years. I have a master's degree. I'm national board certified, and I really appreciate the amendments that were proposed. I'm also very involved in student council. I've been the student council sponsor at Lingle Fort Laramie for the last 10 years. And I believe that this amendment addresses one of the other concerns I have. I don't want to repeat kind of the sentiments that everyone's been sharing. I feel like that message hopefully has been heard. I believe in the amendment that was presented on page 4, section A, Romanet 6, line 8, I believe that the word assembly was struck. And if that's the case, I guess this is probably just a housekeeping issue. But on page 8, I believe it's the new section H, line 22, they have defined assembly as any gathering of students to share information, announcements, present achievements, and things like that. I would ask that that Romanet I be stricken as well. I don't feel like it, if they struck it from the section about notifying parents 5 days prior to approval, it would be a big ask for me to notify parents every time that we decide to do a special assembly. Those are random, they're celebrations, they're things that are not always planned ahead due to the nature of kind of the things that our student council wants to celebrate and acknowledge. So I would ask that in your consideration, you also take that out. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none. Is Superintendent Chalk with us yet?
Mr. Chairman, she's working on calling in on her phone, so I'll let you know.
All right. All right, good afternoon. Please state your name and where you're from.
Hi, my name is Janet Farmer. I am the Health Services Coordinator for Laramie County School District Number 1, but I'm not representing this district. I'm actually a school nurse. I am the Wyoming Director to the National Association of School Nurses, so I'm representing school nurses today. I would like to bring a little bit of a different perspective to the bill and to the amended version. School nurses across the state have worked tremendously hard to follow the law as it is now, specifically to the notification piece and what that looks like. And I'm very concerned of what these additions will do, not only for nurses, but also for other staff, coaches, athletic trainers, coaches for any kind of activity. We don't struggle. In our district, we have set up a system for automatic notifications. I am concerned about the language that says during school hours. Some nurses see 40, 50, 80 kids per day in their office. So having those notifications go out during the school day could be a significant struggle, especially if they're in a district that does not have that set up where it's an automatic notification. So I would ask you to consider that. The other thing that I struggle with on notifications is the school-sponsored trips and activities that happen outside of the school day, but are still sponsored by the school district. I don't know what that would look like in reality when you have a football team that is traveling out of town. A a player gets injured, it's not a significant injury. It might be a minor injury. But someone employed by the school district now has to notify that parent within a very short period of time per this law. And I don't know that that's a realistic expectation. Certainly, and I am very much assured that this happens if there's a serious injury, if there's a broken bone, if there's a concussion, if there's an illness, I'm certain that those notifications are happening, that those coaches would call, that they would get a hold of those parents. It's those other injuries, those small ones that they can take care of on the sideline or in their hotel room.
We're out of time. Wrap
So
up
I
quickly, I'd
would,
appreciate
thank
it.
you very much. I would take any questions.
All right, is Superintendent Chalk with us? I will allow 1 minute if she has.
Mr. Chairman, she is putting in the code now, trying to get it to work. Nope, doesn't look like it.
Okay, sorry about that. All right, we will move on to testimony in support of the bill. Ms. McCoy.
Good afternoon, Chairman Andrew and members of the committee. My name is Patricia McCoy. I'm the chapter chair of Laramie County Moms for Liberty. And I come before you today not just as an advocate for House Bill 200, but as someone who's bewildered by any opposition to such a straightforward common sense bill. Schools are simply being asked to do what any business would consider basic customer service: keep your clients informed. The pushback on this bill is frankly perplexing to me. We're not asking teachers to move mountains. We're asking them to send an email, post a curriculum online, or make a phone call. In an age where teachers can instantly post classroom photos to social media accounts and send mass texts about snow days, are we really pretending it's burdensome to let parents know what their children are learning? Let's talk about these so-called burdensome requirements. 1 day's notice before certain instruction, 5 days notice for assemblies, posting curriculum materials online, updating parents about significant changes. That's it. That's what some are calling and claiming to be too difficult. Every teacher I know already has lesson plans. Every school already has a website, and every district already has email and phone systems in place. We're not inventing new technology here. We're just asking them to hit send. Now, I've heard concerns about teachable moments, but let's be honest, this bill doesn't prevent genuine teachable moments about math, science, or literature. It prevents surprise lessons on controversial social issues that belong in the family's domain. There is a world of difference between explaining why the sky is blue and delving into complex social ideologies without parental knowledge. Here's what's really interesting. Research consistently shows that parent involvement is the single biggest predictor of student success. So why wouldn't educators want parents deeply engaged in their children's education? Why wouldn't they want parents previewing materials and reinforcing those lessons at home? The only logical conclusion is that informed, involved parents make education more effective, not less. Let's address the elephant in the room. If you're opposed to telling parents what you're teaching their children, you need to ask yourself why. Schools are meant to be partners in education, not replacement parents. They're supposed to teach reading, writing, and arithmetic, not serve as secret keepers from the very people who have the right to direct their children's upbringing. The reality is this bill makes everyone's job easier in the long run. Teachers get more engaged parents who support learning at home. Parents can better help with homework because they know what's being taught. Students benefit from consistency between home and school. Administrators have clear guidelines for parent communication, and districts have protection from liability through clear documentation. This isn't rocket science, it's basic respect for parents' rights. And let's be honest, if a school can track attendance, manage lunch accounts, coordinate bus routes, and organize field trips, they can certainly manage to keep parents informed about their own children's education. To those claiming this creates extra work, I ask, aren't you already planning what you're teaching? Aren't you already creating these materials? Aren't you already using email and school websites? All we're asking is that you share what you're already doing with the people who have both the right and the responsibility to know, the parents. The bottom line, HB 200 isn't asking for anything extraordinary. It's simply requiring schools to stay in their lane and respect the fundamental rights of parents to direct their children's upbringing. If that seems controversial, maybe perhaps we need to ask why. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee, and of course, this is, I think, the third time I've spoken before this committee, and as you can see, I have a very vast interest in education, and but what I want to say, you know, I'm definitely in support of this bill. I think it is the rights of the parents to have say in their children's education. I really like how it's constructed. When parents are getting the opportunity to be notified of what is being taught, especially if it's something outside of math, science, English, reading, and gives them that opportunity to opt out. Because I will tell you, if something like that, DEI or sexual orientation or gender identity studies, if my kids were ever put in to one of those classes or any instruction was given to my kids without me even knowing about it, the school would have definitely heard from me on this. And talking to the parents, I talked to hundreds of parents over the summer, and this is definitely a concern. They are definitely, a lot of parents are definitely for this bill. And, you know, I like the amendments that were put in. I do like that we don't want to overburden our teachers because they have a lot of work to do. Given a general overall, though, of what, hey, this is what we're going to be kind of covering as a kind of an overall big picture view, but not to get into the intricate details. I will agree that does kind of, it's a lot of burdensome work that they would have to do, and we don't want to do that. We need them focused on teaching. We need to have them focused on teaching math, reading, science, writing, and our history. One thing, you know, I've been hearing a lot of, or actually, I'm going to get to another point. I also like the fact that our teachers in this bill, our teachers are not going to be burdened with having to figure out how a kid feels on a particular day. You know, if they feel that they're this or they're that, and they're not restricted to or being in fear of punishment because they didn't address them by a certain pronoun based on how they're feeling. So I do agree with that, and I also agree with, of course, the great superintendent of instruction, that even this stuff, gender identity, DEI, sexual orientation, doesn't need to be taught in our K through 12. They need to be learning reading, writing, math, science, basics that need to get them to the next level. Now at the collegiate level, at the undergrad and graduate level, absolutely. I mean, if they want to have instruction on that and to be able to have a good, open, honest discussion about that, that's great, because they're grown adults and they are out of the responsibility of the parents at that time, which takes me to my final point. Our kids are our responsibility. Our kids are ours. Our kids do not belong to the government. Our kids do not belong to an education association. They do not belong to a union, and they do not belong to our government school system. We, the parents, our responsibility. We allow the school system we allow and entrust the school system with the responsibility of our children during the school hours and during extracurricular activities and other events that they're involved in. So I support this bill, and I guarantee you the folks in my House district support this bill. And I'll stand by for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, please go ahead and state your name and where you're from.
Good afternoon, Chairman and committee members. My name is Laura Pavey, and I appreciate this opportunity to speak in support of House Bill 200, the Parental Rights Amendment Bill. This legislation creates practical framework for parent-school partnership while preserving educational flexibility. I'd like to address both the benefits and some of the common misconceptions that we're hearing in the community about these bills. First, let me be clear what HB 200 actually requires. Schools must provide basic curriculum information at the start of each year and communicate updates when the changes occur. This does not mean lesson plans. Teachers are not going to have to provide the entire year's worth of lesson plans at the beginning of the year. That's not what this bill does. I know as a homeschool mom, I have to provide to the public school system the curriculum that I am going to teach my child for the year at the beginning of the school year. The bill does not require complete and unchangeable lesson plans in advance. Instead, it creates a transparent system where parents stay informed about what their child's education is. Let's look at the actual notification timeline of this bill. Parents receive 1 day advance notice before specific types of instruction and 5 days notice for assemblies, extracurricular activities, or guest speakers. All other curriculum changes simply require parent notification. There's no pre-approval process. It just keeps parents informed. These are straightforward timelines that both allow planning and flexibility. This has 3 key benefits. Parents can be active, informed partners with their child's education. They'll have access to curriculum materials, have regular updates about their child's well-being, and clear channels for communication with their schools. Schools maintain their ability to adapt and respond to the students' needs while keeping parents in the loop. The bill acknowledges school educational experiences while respecting parents' authority. 3, the legislation creates clear accountability without creating burdensome restrictions. Schools publish their policies and procedures, provide 30 days notice of policy changes, and maintain annual reporting of concerns and resolutions. HB 200 also strengthens the partnership between schools and families by recognizing parents' fundamental right to guide their children's education. It creates clear, precise processes for addressing concerns. It ensures transparency in educational material and activity. It establishes consistent standards across the Wyoming school districts in our state. Importantly, this bill balances the rights with responsibilities. Parents gain more access to information, but must actively engage with this information. Schools maintain their educational autonomy while keeping families informed. This bill's requirement focuses on communication and transparency. Teachers will notify parents about curriculum updates and changes, but don't need permission or standard education decisions. The process is straightforward. Share the information, keep parents informed, and continue to teach. This creates an informed partnership while maintaining the natural flow of education. The bill represents a practical approach to modern education, one where the parent and schools both work together, each understanding their roles and responsibilities. It creates path for engagement without creating roadblocks to effective teaching. In closing, HB 200 isn't about control. It's about clarity. It's about ensuring parents are informed partners in their child's education while preserving school ability to provide quality education. I encourage you to support this bill and strengthen Wyoming's educational system. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, we have one online we'll go to. We have about 3 minutes left, and there's one more in the room as well. So please go ahead.
My name is Ashley Willie, and I come before you today as both a dedicated educator in Rock Springs, Wyoming, and also as the proud mother of 6 beautiful children. Some of you may have heard of my family and the very real and very hard things that have impacted our lives and our family here. Some of you may have heard my prior testimony when the first parental rights legislation was proposed. I stand here once again, or online, sit here, I guess, once again, to reaffirm my unwavering belief in a parent's right to direct their child's upbringing, education, and well-being. Not the schools, not the teachers, but the parents. As both a parent and a mother, as both a teacher and a mother, I have a unique perspective on the critical role that schools should play to educate, not to parent. Our job as educators is to teach children, not shape their personal identities, beliefs, or values. That is the fundamental right and responsibility of parents. When policies and practices override parental authority, we undermine the family unit and disintegrates trust between schools and the communities that they're supposed to serve. This bill reinforces that parents have the right to know about any changes in their child's well-being, to be informed and give consent before instruction on sensitive topics, and to ensure that neither teacher nor student are forced to comply with ideological mandates that go against personal beliefs. As an educator, I support transparency and parental involvement because I respect the partnership between schools and families. And as a parent, I demand it. Parental rights are not negotiable, and this bill ensures that they are not ignored, diminished, or overridden by school policies. I strongly urge and ask this committee to pass this bill and the changes made, standing firmly on the principle that parents, not government institutions, know what is best for their children. If anybody has questions, I'll answer them.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none. Mr. Winters, would you like a minute to briefly give us your testimony? Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. Nathan Winters, president of the Wyoming Family Alliance, and I'm sure like most of you, you probably recognize the voice and the name of the individual you've just heard, whose rights have been damaged because of the public education system in her local district. We are not here because something hasn't happened. We are here because parents across the state are tired of watching their rights diminished by a public education system that since the time of John Dewey has continuously piled on top of them the pressures of government. And this is a problem. All this bill is academic transparency. Now, some of the elements of the bill, Romanettes 1, 2, and 3 on page 7, one could see that that was going to get a little too onerous, and I do appreciate the hard work of the individuals who brought this bill. But please know that this bill is important. I care about education, as do you. Most of you have high degrees in various fields, and I am appreciative of it. But it's time that we understand that it's the parent, not a government system, in charge of the education of our children. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, public testimony is now closed. Committee, what is your pleasure? Moved by Representative Strzok, seconded by,
What did she say?
Move the bill.
I would suggest tabling the bill.
I think we have a motion to move the bill, which we can consider first, so it's seconded. All right, I think, well, the bill is on the table now. Is there any, unless you would like to challenge the motion?
I would.
All right, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye.
First motion.
Okay, aye.
All opposed.
Nay.
The motion carries. Are there any amendments to the bill?
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Singh.
I would like to move the proposed amendment from the sponsor of the bill.
And I would second that.
Okay, moved by Representative Singh, seconded by Representative Strzok. Is there any discussion on this amendment?
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Singh.
I did want to clarify that on pages 10 and the beginning of 11, the sections about unwritten customs have been stricken from the bill as well, so.
Does the second to, well, actually.
That is as described in the amendment.
I'm sorry, Representative Singh, you're saying that is already. Can you explain that again?
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The concern that we had about the unwritten customs has been stricken from the language by the amendment as presented by the bringer of the bill.
Oh, you're just addressing that.
Yeah.
I understand, thank you. Any further discussion on the bill? Or on the amendment? Seeing none, we are Representative Williams.
Help me with that amendment, if you can recall, members of the committee, Mr. Chairman, that Superintendent of Public Instruction recommended on page 4, line 17, after the language that we have here, a name not approved by the parent. At the time, that seemed reasonable to me.
Representative Williams, I think she was suggesting another piece of legislation that she was recommending we take a look at. I could be wrong, but
It wasn't an amendment to add here.
I don't believe so. Representative Kelly?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, thank you. This bill requires a little bit of cleanup, as we know, and to do it on the fly is not a good idea here. I think we should pass it with the amendments as has been suggested here, and then continue to work on it going forward.
Thank you. I would agree. Is there any discussion on this particular amendment before we vote on it? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Amendment passes. Further discussion on the bill. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would agree with Representative Kelly. Totally agree with the intent here, but we are certainly building this airplane as we're flying it. And I believe we heard a lot today that'll help us amend this to where it is a win-win and can be successful. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Yes, on the bill. Representative Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make it absolutely clear that we are listening to what our teaching community has to say, and it is imperative that we do not make the profession of teaching more difficult as we equip our young people to be successful in life. And so we hear you, and I think that was the purpose of getting this amendment done. We look forward to continuing to work with you folks as we work on the bill.
Further discussion? Seeing none, thank you. We are voting on House Bill 200. Please call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, on House Bill 200, parent rights amendments do pass amended. Representative Bratton?
Aye.
Representative Erickson?
Aye.
Representative Guggenmoss?
Aye.
Representative Kelly?
Aye.
Representative Lawley has left an absentee vote of no. Representative Singh?
Aye.
Representative Strock?
Aye.
Representative Williams?
No.
Chairman Andrew?
Aye.
That is 7 aye, 2 no.
The bill passes the committee.
Need to make my substitute amendment.
Oh. Representative Bratton, please go ahead, yes.
I was told that after we passed the amended bill was when I should, in the roll call vote, that's when I could move to make a substitute bill that would incorporate all the amendments that we just discussed. So it would be a clean bill coming out of committee that people could look at and then provide further input. So that I'm making that motion.
I'll second that.
All right. All those in favor, discussion? All those in favor of Representative Bratton's motion, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Motion passes. House Bill 324 is now on the table for our consideration. Is that- I'll just go for it. All right, since I am the sponsor of this bill and I do not have a vice chair, I'm just going to go ahead and present it. So House Bill 324 is a pretty simple bill actually, but I think, it has large implications. What House Bill 324 does is that it takes the 4 statewide elected offices and it removes them from the statewide employment system and it makes it so their employees are at will. And this conforms their offices to what the judicial branch, the governor's office, and the legislative branch all have in common, and that is that their employees are at will. And the purpose of this is really so that our elected officials, our agencies that have an elected executive, can steer their agencies how they need to. They are elected by the people to serve a particular purpose, and having permanent employees that they can't move around to where they need to makes it often difficult to be able to do that sometimes. So that's what the intent of this bill does. It was really modeled after, we kind of just took the language from that is currently in law that governs the Legislative Service Office and applied that to these agencies. So if there's any questions, I would take them, but I would also love to hear from our state agencies. Any questions for me? Seeing none, thank you. Who would like to go first? Or everyone together?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Megan Degenfelder, State Superintendent of Public Instruction. I appreciate the bringer of this bill and kind of thinking innovatively about how we operate government and looking at systems changes as we move forward. Many of you know I come from the private sector into this job, and so I think very much in that mind frame. And really am looking to, in all things that we do at the Department of Education, have the most efficient, innovative, responsive and accountable agency as possible. And so would say I think what this bill does is provides the accountability to voters in terms of what we've been elected to do and to fulfill that mission. I think it also creates a level of efficiency in the HR process. At times, some of those processes can take months to fill a position as it currently is. And would also say, of course, we're a right to work state. And that this mirrors the legislative branch, judicial, and the governor's office. Would offer, in talking to my colleagues, a potential amendment that would be regarding HR personnel. And that would be to move two open positions within HRD to the auditor's office. The auditor, of course, oversees payroll. I can let her speak to that in further detail, but makes the most sense there. But then adds in language that these individuals would be hired by representatives from each of the 4 offices. So with that, I will stand for any questions and pass off to my colleagues.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Treasurer Meyer.
And I would concur with that. The auditor wasn't here and she got a job, and I think that's appropriate. But there's a couple of things that I'd like to make sure that it might not be clear, that although that we get, I guess, the ability to do, compensation, job classification, personnel rules, and the rest, I want to make sure with those employees that essentially that the governor is, I guess I would, and I don't know if I use the word prohibited or not allowed, however, to administer or do anything with that's employee-related activities, including offering recommendations on budgets. I think each one of us should, basically do our own budget. I know there's, I think, 2 of us that are revenue producing, myself and the Secretary of State's office. I think one of the best management practices that we see in Alaska and in the Florida retirement thing is that they have what's called basis point funding. And it's a little different in Alaska. Alaska's basis point funding is about, I think it's about 220 basis points, or a little over 2%. That's all inclusive of all management fees and everything else. Florida, they've got a fund that is about roughly 10 times our size, and I think they're somewhere around 4 to 5 basis points. I think what we would do is put a basis point funding budget together that's somewhere around 10 or something like that. That has to be approved by the legislature. The reason for that, if it's not approved by the legislature, we lose our sovereign immunity. And so that's extremely important. You guys always have to be part of the process, so we can have that. But that would allow us essentially, and I'll tell you a quick story from Pat Arp, who was a longtime deputy in different areas, in the superintendent's office, in the, I think the auditor's office, I know the treasurer's office, and the governor's office. And while she was in the governor's office, I said, you guys have given me a classification that this isn't what my employee does. He says, Kurt, don't worry about it. Just go ahead and essentially lie to us about what your employee does. And so I'm glad that you're giving us the classification and stuff, but we need to basically make sure that we are not involved with the executive branch's office at all. It took me 14 months to get an employee onboarded. And I'm not going to say that the office slow rolled it or what, but I know that when we eventually got the right classification, it only took 10 days after the Appropriations Committee said, you have to change this so the treasurer can actually employ a chief operating officer rather than a chief investment officer, because he doesn't need 2 chief investment officers. So we need to basically cut it right to the quick and essentially give every office their ability. I'm looking at the at-will positions for my office. I probably will look at 2 classifications of at-will. Roughly probably 20% would be at-will, hiring and firing for absolutely no cause. And the rest of them, I think I need a little bit of, I would say, job security to actually get people employed, but it would be basically for cause, but developed by the state treasurer, and we do it by rules. So I think I got, even if these are all at will, I think I have the ability to have 2 classes of at will employees in my office. I want to make sure that that's the case in that regard. I applaud you guys for understanding that we have different needs, that there's areas where we have to be competitive. We're not competitive in accountants anymore. Essentially, we used to be able to pay more than the largest accounting firm here. Now we're probably $5,000 to $10,000 under the market, and the largest accounting firm could probably hire every one of my employees and pay them $10,000 more. So those are the things that you have to adjust as you're going, and understanding that there is a market, and in these really critical positions in both the auditor's office and our office on accountants, it's hard for us to get the people in that we need. We just hired one here though yesterday, so that's great. But, we're still short a couple. And the other thing that we need to look at is add procurement to this, because that is just as problematic in procurement as actually employment. So there's some things in there that really slow things down. We probably should continue to go through ETS, although a lot of times there's no particular expertise in there on the type of software that we employ. And perhaps other electeds have the same problem, that there's no particular software expertise in ETS on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Treasurer Meyer, the concerns you brought up, can we address them in this bill with an amendment? Or is that a different legislation?
Yeah, I think you can address, maybe not the procurement. I don't know if the title's broad enough. It kind of depends on what your speaker says when you're moving that. That's maybe a little bit on the gray side, but yeah, I think you can say some things in there that expressly, direct the workings of all of these things through the 2 employees that the superintendent spoke about, and so that we would actually be doing those type of things and developing our own classifications. I think it's clear there, but there's no clear that the budget goes through the governor's budget and doesn't go directly to the legislature from each thing. So maybe you'd say that each office shall, develop and direct a budget, that to the extent that it is based on, and I hate to use the word block grant, but it's kind of, the basis point funding is almost a block grant, but it is always reviewed by the legislature.
Thank you. Further questions? Auditor Racines?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Christy Racinas, serving as state auditor, and I apologize, I was meeting with the Civil Air Patrol, which is an awesome group of kids, so that's why I was coming in hot. I've thought a lot about this bill, and I will try to be quick. I know time is tight. Thought about a lot about this bill. I think as you probably all recognize, there's certainly risks and benefits to this change. I'm in a position where I think the benefits outweigh the risks at this point. As the superintendent mentioned, I mean, as elected officials, we are held by the public to a different and more visible standard than most other agency directors are, yet we are not able to be nimble and not able to reward or retain employees in a way that is effective. And I will tell you, employees, we are already at a disadvantage because employees are hesitant to come and work for an elected official for fear, well, they don't know who they're going to work for. And realistically, that could happen in any state agency, but there's a little bit of an aura, well, I want some job security. I want to know I will have a job 2 or 3 or 5 years down the road as long as I work hard and do well. So I think any flexibility that can be given to these offices is good, and this lays the groundwork. Now, I'll tell you, in my office in particular, I have an issue with hiring CPAs. We produce the financial statements for the entire state of Wyoming. It is exceptionally complex. It results in a document that's 250 pages long. Essentially, those employees are supposed to be the expert on all things accounting for every single state agency. So I need CPAs with 5 to 10 years of experience, and at the very max I can pay them is about $92,000 a year. That is not realistic. It's not realistic in Cheyenne for the cost of housing anymore. And they can go be a CFO at another agency for 120, 130, 140 with those credentials. And in fact, I just had one depart for that. So that's my office in particular, but I think that's the issue, is flexibility. Now, in our budget requests, the second piece of this, just for food for thought, we're still held to the exact position numbers and keeping our salaries flat, which within the budgetary process. So I think the ultimate goal would be for legislature to say, okay, superintendent, treasurer, here's an amount of money, go forth and do good work. And we don't have that flexibility, and this bill doesn't fully give us that flexibility, but it lays the groundwork. Because right now you're saying, okay, Christy, you have this much money, but you must have this many employees, and you can't move the money around. But this is, like I said, this sort of lays the groundwork, and I don't mean to speak for everybody, so please disagree if you, yeah.
I guess to follow up on that, there is some budgetary constraint in a footnote in the budget now, which it says that we have absolutely no flexibility in what we do with our employees. If you got the same amount of money, you might say, well, if we're going to keep the employees, let's give up a position and we'll put some more money into the ones that we have, But essentially, or we might say that, yeah, we actually need 2 or 3 more positions because this circumstance changed in the office and we need to hire some people over here. But the problem is that by the time you have a demand, it's at least 1.5 years, sometimes 2 years, before you actually can get into a position where you can meet that demand through the appropriation process, which is kind of frustrating. I get back to it. We want to run our business like a business, instead of, a governmental entity from the standpoint that because we have different situations that demand that we have, we just have things that we have to meet. And sometimes you go out and you do a contract with a third-party company, and it costs you 2-3 times as much as if you could, maybe 4 times as much if you do it in-house. So, but if it's a job that has to be done, you don't have the people, you go out, contract it, and it's going to be more.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions for anyone up here? All right, seeing none, thank you.
I just say we're not reinventing the wheel. A lot of states across the country have that autonomy for the top 5 elected officials, and the budget isn't controlled or anything. Nothing is controlled by the governor.
Thank you. Committee, I see we are running out of time, but given where we are on the floor, is there anyone opposed to staying here a few more minutes and working the bill? So we can, okay, we've already noticed Monday, so it's going to be hard to push it over. All right, well, thank you for that. So we do need to take public comment, but I don't believe there's anybody providing public testimony. There's
Mr. Chairman,
someone from the treasurer's office still. I
Ms.
believe.
Williams is online, so let me see if she is ready.
While we're waiting for that, I do have an amendment to this that I really should have. Well, did I send this out? I don't think I did. That I should have put in here, but essentially this amendment makes this work. It moves 2 positions that are unfilled from A&I that currently would be in charge of staffing these positions over to the auditor's office, who does run the payroll and everything right now, so that they can work on staffing these 2 agencies. And I have it, if anyone wants to read it completely, I can pass this around, but.
Mr. Chairman, if you want to email it to me, I can get somebody to run some copies.
It's
If
all
it's
right.
ready
I
for
think,
that.
I think we're okay.
Okay. So Ms. Williams is not in my meeting at all anymore. I don't know what happened to
Okay.
her.
All right. Well, then if there's no one else, public testimony is closed. Committee, what is your pleasure? Moved by Representative Williams, seconded by Representative Guggenmoss. Are there any amendments? Representative Singh.
Mr. Chairman, I believe there is a suggested amendment that I would like to move.
Would anyone like to second my, moved by Representative Singh, seconded by Representative Strzok, to move those 2 positions from A&I to the Department of Audit? Any discussion? The Auditor's Office. Yes, that is what it does. Thank you, I'm sorry. Right. All right, any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, no. Amendment is adopted. Any further amendments? Representative Strzok.
Thank you, Chairman. I think there was one that Treasurer Meyer was talking about. Is this going to be, what did you all think about that with the budget and putting that in there? So just kind of want to talk about that, or something bring.
Yeah, I believe he was advocating for a block grant system of funding. And I do think we would need another bill to be able to do that. And that would be a question on whether the legislature would like to give up that much control or not, which maybe, but.
But I thought it still stayed with the legislature. Came out of the, maybe I misunderstood something.
Would you like to clarify that for us?
I think the other amendment was to clarify that each individual office was responsible for their own budgeting process, rather than it going to the governor still telling us like we were an agency, what the budget recommendation would be. And that's essentially.
I'd like to hear if anyone else has.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I think as we start talking about our budgeting and block grants, so those two pieces, I think that they are separate. I think both of those things we want to work towards, and we've brought that up with the chairs of appropriations as well to start that conversation. But I think given, what the topic of this bill is, that it might be premature to include it in such.
Yeah, the block grant, I agree, as far as making sure that, and actually, the governor this last session said that he didn't recommend or not recommend anything. So he's kind of moving that way, but essentially it would be nice to have it, I think, in statute, just so that the process is kind of staying the way it's evolving.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add, so I think based on the treasurer's comments, there's three parts to this. Number one is the flexibility of at-will employees. Number two is block grant funding. Then number three is the ability, what the treasurer's mentioning, to submit our own budget separate from the governor. So those would be correct.
All right, thank you. Please go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, and I fully agree with the treasurer's sentiment. And again, the current governor has operated in that way anyway. That's not to say what future governors might. My only concern is those budget requirements that require us to follow the instructions of the state budget department are in a totally separate statute. So, yeah, so that would be my, this is not probably the, right, yeah.
Well.
Sorry, Kurt, we love your idea, but not here.
Okay, well. That, I know we've done it before, but sometimes it's a little bit of a gray area. So we'll slay the dragon that's before us, I guess. Okay.
All right, thank you. Further amendments? Seeing none. Discussion on the bill? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, on House Bill 324, state elected officials, employees, at will, and regulations do pass as amended. Representative Bratton?
Aye.
Representative Erickson? Aye. Representative Guggenmoss?
Aye.
Representative Kelly?
Aye.
Representative Lawley did not leave a vote for this one, so if it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, I'll mark her as excused.
Please.
Representative Singh?
Aye.
Representative Strock?
Aye.
Representative Williams?
Aye.
Chairman Andrew?
Aye.
8 aye, 1 excused.
All right, thank you, committee. The meeting is adjourned.
Okay.